Hello, Internet. Welcome to Racing Orbit, a show where we talk to scientists, engineers, and professionals working in different verticals of the space industry to understand their stories, career trajectories, and to gather sage advice in pursuing a career in space. Today, we have Smiti Maini Dhami, who's a seasoned professional working with Telespaceo Vega as a spacecraft operations engineer. Over her career, she has worked in various government and private companies like UTC Aerospace, ISRO, National Aerospace Laboratories, DRDO, etc. Welcome, Smiti.
Hello, yeah, it's good to be here.
So, starting off, your career experience seems a bit daunting for a layman to understand. So, what does a spacecraft operations engineer do? What are your responsibilities at your current job?
Okay, so basically, the job of a spacecraft operations engineer is to take care of the spacecraft. The spacecraft is orbiting hundreds of kilometers away, or yeah, for the geo spacecraft, thousands of kilometers away. And the job of a spacecraft operations engineer is to ensure that the spacecraft is safe and following its designated path in the orbit, and everything's okay with its health. If at all there are issues, take care of those issues and make changes to the configuration if necessary. So, and yeah, these spacecrafts are monitored and on ground 24/7 by controllers. And if there's an issue with the spacecraft, the controller calls the engineer that I have this issue, and the engineer is supposed to look into what might be the reason for these issues and solve them.
Now, so you talked about spacecraft. So, what is the life cycle of a satellite? So, how does a satellite evolve from being a conceptual idea on paper to being a massive craft, whizzing around in space? So, how does that pan out?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. And yeah, so to start with, every satellite has to have a purpose. So the first thing comes from the user. The user wants some particular data or some weather monitoring or better pictures of Earth or something like that, or a communication network. So first thing is user requirement, and then from user requirement it comes to the design and concept phase where engineers sit and think to meet these user requirements. What are the sensors, actuators, propulsion system, orbit design, what instruments do we fly on the satellite. So all that comes under the design phase. And then in the satellite design, we go through a lot of iterations. If we need to refine the design, we do a lot of testing in this design and development phase. And we also have a lot of milestone reviews like preliminary design review, critical design review, etc., etc. And then this design is finalized and it goes into for manufacturing. And then once manufactured, we test again, because testing is very, very, very important. We're actually sending a piece of man-made thing to space, and it's very important to test. And then after launch, finally when it's launched, so launch is also something very challenging, but yeah, from the satellite point of view, after launch comes the LEOP phase, which is launch and early operations phase, in which the satellite design team checks out if everything is okay, is working as per design, and then hands over the satellite to the operations team, which takes care of it through the rest of its life, which could be 5 years for a low Earth orbit satellite to 15 years for a geo communication satellite. And then that's the life part of it, and then deorbit the satellite if required when its life is over.
Yeah, so you have worked in ISRO for a very long time. So what was your role in ISRO, and how was the work there? If you could elaborate on your roles there.
Okay, so at ISRO, I was working in spacecraft design. So I was working on the design of a very interesting subsystem, which is AOCS, Attitude and Orbit Control System. And as a design engineer, you're supposed to work with different types. And as a design engineer, I was working with different types of satellites. I was working for, I have worked on satellites in the LEO orbit and also in the GEO and also on interplanetary missions. So yeah, as an AOCS engineer, you're supposed to understand what the satellite demands, what the satellite control system is required to do. Sometimes it needs to be very agile, sometimes it needs to be very stable. So the AOCS engineer is supposed to understand that and work on what kind of sensors, what kind of actuators are suitable for it, and design the control laws. So yeah, it was very interesting work, and uh, it's very
Yeah,
nice.
so could you explain a bit to our viewers what you mean by sensors and actuators?
Okay, so AOCS needs sensors and actuators. AOCS is like the brain, I'd say, and sensors and actuators are like sensors. For example, my the best example that comes to my mind is our eyes. So we see something, and our brain tells us that if you see this, you do this, and then that doing part is done by the actuators, the seeing part or the sensing part is done by the sensors, and the deciding or the computing part is done by the brain, which I'd say is the AOCS. Yeah. So sensors and
Okay.
actuators are an integral part of any control system.
So it's like responding to a stimulus by sensing what the stimulus is.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so about the Mars Orbiter mission, so it was a huge engineering feat for ISRO as well as the Indian space communities in as a whole, considering that most of the payloads were manufactured by different places in India, different organizations and institutes in India. So what did it mean to you working on this, which being a pioneering mission for India as such, an interplanetary mission which was kind of unthought of at that point. So, what did it mean to you?
Okay, yeah. So personally, for me, Mars Orbiter mission was the first project in which I worked as a design engineer. Because before that, I worked a bit to see the layup and learn on the job. But Mars Orbiter mission was my first project as a design engineer, and I was working on the orbit raising maneuvers, etc. And it was a very challenging project. Obviously, the schedules were very tight, and we had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of testing, but it was thrilling and exciting at the same time. So I really enjoyed being a part of that mission at a very early stage in my career, and I learned a lot from that. Everyone was very, it was a very new, I was very new at that time, but I got a lot of guidance and a lot of things that I learned with that mission.
Yeah, definitely. So, as you mentioned, you've worked in both design phase as well as the operations phase. So, how do you contrast design and operations? So, how different are they, and which one do you prefer in terms of interest?
Okay, a very nice question, I'd say. Design, as I explained a bit, is about understanding the requirements and then thinking of what should go in the satellite, or how what code we need to write to make something function like we want it to. And operations is you have something, and how can you best get whatever you want out of it. It's the design and development, and everything is frozen in the operations phase. And how do you get to meet all the mission requirements that are required to? So I'd say that operations design is much more flexible. Design has the because in design and development phase we have the option to change, iterate, test, redesign. In operations, it's you obviously have the chance to update some things. You can always send a patch to the spacecraft to make it do something that it was not designed to. But I'd say operations is more less chaotic, I'd say, than design.
Yeah, so now we'll kind of move to your personal stuff, personal questions. So the show is called Racing Orbit, indicating, elevating yourself from your previous orbit. So, what has been your racing orbit maneuver, wherein you could take yourself above and beyond what you expected yourself to do, and suddenly you overperformed and became what you dreamed to be?
Okay, so yeah, raising orbit is something that I found very interesting. I really love the name, and here I'd like to also add that I have a blog with which I'm not as regular as I'd want to be, which is called the Drifting Satellite. And there, in my very first post, I did an explanatory post for why the name Drifting Satellite, and there I had written, okay, I am not a very good writer, but I had written some science stuff about if you want to raise your orbit, or if you can either continue to drift in your own orbit, but if you want to go to another orbit, you have to like put in some effort, you have to put in the fuel, you have to make an effort and change your orbit, because otherwise the laws of motion wouldn't allow you to, you continue there. So I'd say for raising my orbit, it's that uh, as I told earlier, it's that spark of not being afraid of change. So I've taken a lot of career decisions, like leaving my job at UTC, which I got just after graduating from college, and going for a master's, and then doing a master's and leaving that, discontinuing that after 1 year because I got a job at ISRO, and then leaving my job at ISRO and moving to Germany, and getting a job, a very good space job here as well. So these decisions and these changes that I've made into my life are obviously have taken me to a new orbit, and you never know whether the new orbit would be good for you or not, but what is important is to do it and see, let's see where this goes, because that's what I'd say is this importance of raising my orbit to me, uh, not being afraid of change, I'd say.
Yeah, I've never been afraid of change. Yeah, that's a very good quality to have all the time. So, what are some people who really inspired you in the space sector or otherwise?
People who inspired me, I'd say I was a big fan of our ex-president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and yeah, he's been a very inspiring figure. He in fact started he I don't know if he started, but yeah, he in fact also was a part of ISRO and then went on to be the missile man of India. But yeah, his beginnings were at ISRO and in development of the launch vehicles and stuff. So his story was very inspiring, and I never thought that I would get to meet him one day. And one day before the Mars orbit insertion, when we were at ISTRAC, he had come and he met with all the engineers and asked them what field they were working in. And it was very surreal to me. And he was, I think, 85 or so at that time, and still to take out time and not only to wish luck but also be a part of the community. I really felt that okay, even at this age, he's eager to come and meet and inspire young engineers or young scientists like me. So it was a very important milestone, I'd say, meeting Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Yeah, it was amazing talking to you, Smiti, and your experiences and your advice has been awesome. So, thank you for joining us and thank you for taking your time for us.
Thank you so much. It was a very nice experience for me, and I hope more people are inspired to join this wonderful field of science and space and benefit the humanity in the coming years. Yeah.